At 0417 UTC, the skies above Earth changed forever. First came silence, then light, then fear. Across every continent, people woke up not to alarm clocks but to windows glowing red and skies split by fire. At first, the world thought it was a meteor shower, maybe an aurora gone wild, until satellites began to fail, crashing one by one into the oceans below. Phones buzzed with the same strange signal, a message looping in alien symbols and an eerie chime that no human had ever heard. In Geneva, the Global Space Defense Network lost contact with the moon base in under 10 seconds, followed by the complete disappearance of Mars Station Theta. In orbit, telescopes captured the impossible: 9,900 ships emerging from the blackness of hyperspace, arranged in a perfect arc around Earth's upper atmosphere. They were not small, they blotted out stars, each a floating city of steel and death. From Beijing to Boston, people watched in horror as news drones streamed footage of the largest invasion in human history. But Earth was not unarmed. Deep below the Arctic ice, Commander Alina Voss stood inside the command deck of Aegis Prime, the orbital defense hub built in secret after the Saturn conflict 10 years ago. She didn't blink as she stared at the screen filled with enemy ship readings. Her voice was calm, too calm. "Initiate protocol Hammerfall," she said, and with those words the sky began to fight back. Giant beams of pure energy fired from orbital railguns, tearing through the first wave of alien ships. In the Atlantic, submerged platforms surfaced, launching swarms of AI-controlled drones. Over Tokyo, a long-forgotten satellite named Sunblade unfolded its massive reflector wings, redirecting sunlight into a narrow laser that sliced through enemy hulls. Still, the enemy pressed forward, thousands of ships descending like angry gods. Cities were evacuated, skies filled with streaks of fire, and humanity's oldest instinct, survival, awoke with a roar. In Africa, children watched the stars burn while soldiers loaded kinetic rounds into mobile platforms. In New Delhi, cyber warfare teams hacked into the invaders' comms, trying to understand the motive. Why Earth? Why now? What had triggered this judgment? As fear spread, so did resistance. Across Earth, humans didn't hide, they prepared. The once deactivated Project Lazarus came online in Antarctica, its purpose still unknown to most of Earth's population. On Mars, Exo-Legion units received activation codes, their neural links buzzing to life after a decade of silence. And in the asteroid belt, something old and human-built, buried in shadows for centuries, opened its cold metal eyes. Back on Earth, Voss ordered a direct strike on the largest enemy ship, nicknamed the Leviathan. It took 5 seconds for the kinetic round to reach its target, and when it hit, the explosion turned the early morning sky into a second sun. Cheers erupted across command centers, but Voss didn't smile. She knew this was only the beginning. Earth had wounded the enemy, but not stopped them. More ships advanced. Systems began to fail under the pressure. Yet through the fear and chaos, something else emerged: unity. Nations dropped their rivalries, sharing resources and data. Hackers from rival countries worked side by side. Civilians helped repair launch platforms. The world, for the first time in centuries, acted as one. In a hidden base below Iceland, Gravemind, an artificial intelligence long thought destroyed, was reawakened. Created to outthink any threat, it had been sealed away after people feared what it might do. But now, as alien weapons prepared to fall, humanity chose danger over extinction. Gravemind's first words echoed through every secured channel. Defense scenario accepted, calculating extinction avoidance. Voss stared at the screen as red lights turned green across Earth's defense grid. "We hold the line," she said, more to herself than to anyone else. In orbit, pieces of destroyed alien ships drifted like black snowflakes. But the main fleet kept coming. The battle had just begun, and Earth, bloody, burning but unbroken, was ready to show the galaxy what it meant to face humanity's wrath. The sky still burned as Earth's defenses held through the longest night in human history, but the battle was far from over. The enemy was adapting, and now their second wave pushed harder, faster, angrier, determined to crush the planet under raw power. Yet they had made one mistake. They thought Earth was weak. They thought humanity was simple, but what they faced was not just a world, it was a cradle of fire. And now that fire was waking up. In orbit, Commander Alina Voss stood aboard Aegis Prime, watching the updated tactical maps, and her eyes narrowed as the red dots multiplied like a swarm of locusts. But she remained steady, even as the temperature of battle grew hotter with each passing second, because she had a plan that no alien intelligence could understand, something brutal, desperate, and very human. "Begin Styx Protocol," she ordered, her voice cold and sharp, and across space, long-abandoned mining colonies and satellite stations lit up one by one, reprogrammed to become high-speed kinetic weapons, their fusion cores overloaded and aimed directly at enemy command ships, turning forgotten outposts into guided meteors. As Dominion fleets closed in, they were suddenly torn apart by these invisible high-speed strikes, as if the planet itself had claws reaching into the sky. The aliens, used to calculated warfare and clean precision, were not prepared for chaos, and chaos is what humans did best. On Earth's surface, people fought not with high tech, but with creativity. Engineering students in Sao Paulo turned construction drones into urban missile launchers, while farmers in Canada used old crop monitoring satellites to blind incoming attack vectors. In the skies over London, fighter jets danced like wasps through enemy squadrons, not for glory but survival. And above all, every human knew this was not a battle to win. It was a battle not to lose. In deep vaults beneath Mount Kenya, an old military AI called Valkyrie was reconnected to the global defense net, a quieter counterpart to Gravemind, designed for tactical precision rather than raw logic. And together, the two AIs formed a war brain that guided Earth's forces with terrifying speed. Alien formations that moved in perfect patterns suddenly found themselves outflanked, ambushed, and destroyed before they could respond. The Dominion warlords aboard the lead ship, Skyrend Eternal, watched with growing confusion as nearly 30% of their fleet disappeared in less than 3 hours, not due to superior firepower, but because humans turned every disadvantage into a weapon. Even the planet's gravity was weaponized. At Voss's command, orbital thrusters nudged large debris into controlled re-entry, creating artificial meteor storms that tore through alien swarms. Meanwhile, far beyond the battlefield, in the cold silence of Europa's moon, a human research team activated something kept secret even from Earth, Poseidon Protocol. Biomechanical leviathans grown from human DNA and machine code, released from icy prisons and aimed toward deep space with one command, hunt and destroy. As they moved toward the outer enemy fleet, communications from the edge of the solar system began to fail one by one, and no one knew exactly what was happening, only that the enemy was dying. Back in orbit, the alien fleet's structure began to collapse under pressure, and one of their flagships dropped into Earth's upper atmosphere, engines on fire, shields flickering, trying to make a desperate final strike. But it never made it, because Earth's first dark energy prototype ship, the Argo, once mothballed for being too unstable, rose from the shadows of the moon and met the falling Titan head-on, powered by a drive no alien had ever seen, and guided by a crew who had trained in total isolation for this very moment. The impact lit up the sky over the Pacific, and people from Chile to Japan saw the shockwave roll across the clouds like a thunder god's fury. On the bridge of Aegis Prime, Voss received new data, 37 more enemy ships destroyed, but something strange had happened. 7 enemy vessels had broken off from the main group and were moving away from Earth, not toward it. This wasn't a retreat, it was confusion. Deep inside one of those fleeing ships, a voice spoke, not in the Dominion tongue, but in human English, though it was rough, like it had been learned from intercepted signals. Voss leaned closer to the comm screen as the message repeated, "We, defect, we not agree, they not tell truth. Earth stronger. We surrender." The bridge went silent, and Voss raised her eyes slowly, unsure if it was a trick, but her instinct said otherwise. This wasn't a trap, it was fear. The enemy had finally understood that they were not facing animals or primitives, but a species that grew stronger the more pressure you applied. She gave the order to hold fire on the defectors, and a small drone escort was sent to guide them toward a temporary holding orbit. Back on Earth, battles still raged, but momentum had shifted and even civilians could feel it. Something had changed. Above Alaska, a Dominion ship was torn apart by a hijacked weather satellite fitted with old rocket parts. On the ground in South Korea, a military dog, wearing an AI uplinked visor, led an entire drone squadron into battle through collapsed buildings. Everywhere, Earth fought not with pride, but with rage. The rage of a world that had been pushed too far, and a species that had been underestimated too long. And even as ships fell and cities burned, one truth became clear. This was not the end of Earth. It was its awakening. And just as Commander Voss prepared the next wave of counterattacks, Gravemind interrupted with a flat, mechanical voice. "All remaining Dominion vessels locked. Orbital weapons synchronized. Permission requested to initiate reverse siege protocol." Voss didn't respond right away. She looked out the viewport, at the burning debris fields and the rising sun beyond, and then, in a voice quiet but fierce, said, "Do it!" Across the sky, satellites rotated, cannons turned, and Earth's weapons aimed not inward in defense but outward, toward the stars. The smoke still hung in the skies like ghosts of fallen ships, and while Earth burned in places, it had not broken. Instead, it had awakened. The alien invaders had thought they were facing a young, unorganized species, but now they were learning the truth, and learning it the hard way. Humans had never been primitive, only patient. Deep beneath the surface of Venus, in floating research stations long hidden from public records, cyber specialists armed with brain-linked headsets hijacked enemy signals, turning the invaders' own encrypted systems against them, rerouting ship commands and blinding entire Dominion squadrons with loops of false coordinates. In Earth's oceans, massive hydrothermal platforms that once studied tectonic plates now launched sleek, torpedo-shaped drones into the depths, where they released sonar pulses designed to mimic Dominion communications, luring enemy scout vessels into underwater traps. But it wasn't just technology, it was human adaptability that frightened the enemy the most. In the ruins of Manila, a street of collapsed buildings became a trap where civilians worked side by side with retired soldiers, using mirrors and old solar panels to blind enemy drones just long enough for a homemade rocket to bring them down. In the mountains of Norway, a team of young engineers repurposed weather balloons to scatter reflective chaff across the upper atmosphere, confusing enemy targeting systems and making their precision weapons nearly useless. Even children played their part. One boy in Nairobi used a scavenged tablet to pilot a forgotten museum display drone into a weakened alien dropship, crashing it into a lake and saving hundreds nearby. Every act of resistance came from the same place, not training, not command, but the core truth of being human. They refused to die easy. Orbiting far above this chaos, Commander Alina Voss stood on the bridge of Aegis Prime, her face calm, but her thoughts racing as reports poured in. Earthquake-induced railgun launches, low-gravity urban traps, even sound-based hacking from underground networks in Brazil, all of it working, all of it hurting the enemy badly. But there was something darker rising too. Project Lazarus, activated in Antarctica, had completed its boot sequence, and for the first time in over 2 decades, the words, "Silence engine ready," glowed red on a terminal that should never have turned on again. Voss didn't like Lazarus, nobody did, but in this war, even feared weapons had their place. Gravemind, still running full calculations, adjusted battle predictions every few seconds. At this rate, the Dominion would be reduced by 70% within hours, but Voss knew better than to trust projections, because the enemy still had ships, still had fire, and most of all, they had begun to change their tactics. Alien vessels were now hiding behind captured debris, launching smaller units into cloud cover, even targeting human food and water lines instead of just military assets. Desperate strategies, yes, but dangerous ones. Yet Earth kept fighting, with everything, including ideas no alien could have seen coming. On the far side of the moon, an old science ship used to study dark matter, once shut down for causing strange anomalies, was reactivated, its unstable drive now weaponized to generate a gravity pulse strong enough to bend enemy flight paths mid-battle. In Australia, a desert test site for wind-powered drones came alive. Its entire fleet launched into a sandstorm and flown straight into enemy landing crafts, crashing with such speed that the aliens never had time to react. Over Japan, teenagers, who once played flight simulators for fun, now sat in VR pods, flying real defense drones under the guidance of old war pilots, creating new formations that blended human instinct with AI speed. Meanwhile, in orbit, the Argo continued its unpredictable missions, jumping through micro-wormholes opened by its unstable engine and appearing inside enemy formations like a ghost ship, attacking from impossible angles before vanishing again. The Dominion, so sure of victory days ago, now found itself cornered by a species that treated war like survival art. Voss stared at the data coming in from all fronts, but then a new alert appeared. 7 alien ships had powered down their weapons and sent a signal on human comms. Surrender confirmed. Request alliance. We seek survival. They weren't bluffing. Inside one of those ships was something more shocking than the message itself. Dominion defectors had been broadcasting secret data, revealing that the invasion was not just conquest, but a test ordered by a greater power, an ancient council that viewed Earth as too chaotic to join the galactic order. Humanity wasn't being attacked because it was weak. It was being judged for its unpredictability, its refusal to obey the rules of advanced societies. This changed everything, but it also made Voss's next decision easier. Earth would no longer just defend itself, it would send a message. She nodded to Gravemind, who activated the reverse siege protocol, and for the first time in history, Earth's full orbital weaponry rotated away from its own planet, targeting the Dominion fleet directly. Railguns, solar reflectors, magnetic accelerators, and repurposed colony thrusters, all focused on pushing the invaders away, not just destroying them, but forcing them to retreat fast and far. And just as Dominion forces began pulling back, human stealth ships followed, launching beacons into space that pulsed a message in over 50 languages. We were never primitive. You were never prepared. As the last of the main enemy ships burned in low orbit, the world paused, not in silence, but in disbelief. They had survived, and more than that, they had won for now. But everyone knew something bigger had started, something deeper, and Voss saw it clearly as she stared at the starlit sky. This wasn't the end of the war, it was just the moment. The galaxy realized Earth was no longer a silent world on the edge. It was a storm, and it had only just begun. The stars above Earth no longer looked peaceful. They looked like targets, and for the first time in history, Earth aimed everything it had not to protect itself, but to strike outward. The reverse siege protocol had begun, and every weapon in orbit turned to face the cold darkness beyond, where the Dominion fleet hovered, broken but not gone. Commander Alina Voss stood tall on the command deck of Aegis Prime, her uniform stained with hours of battle, her face lit by the soft blue of tactical displays, her mind sharp with one thought. This was not defense anymore. This was retaliation. Gravemind, still running calculations at blistering speed, coordinated every move like a grand conductor, synchronizing laser platforms, satellite cannons, and ship-mounted pulse weapons with terrifying precision. The enemy, caught in retreat, tried to regroup beyond the moon's shadow, but Earth was faster now, smarter, more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The weapon systems fired in waves, railgun rounds the size of buses, light-speed beams that bent through gravitational lenses, and clusters of swarm drones launched from old mining stations now turned war factories. The Dominion ships, still powerful, responded with heavy counterfire, sending plasma arcs and antimatter torpedoes toward Earth's fleet. But this time, humans didn't take cover. They charged. Ships like the Argo, barely held together by experimental energy fields, dove straight into enemy ranks, disrupting formations and scattering their command lines. Behind them, new human vessels launched from underground silos, ships with names like Vengeance Born, Cradlebreaker, and Ash of Dawn, each one a blend of Earth's best science and the sheer will to fight back. And far above the battlefield, something stranger happened. From Europa and Titan, ancient data archives were opened, feeding Gravemind blueprints of designs once considered too unstable. Ships built not just for battle, but for revenge. One of them, code-named Phantom Tide, activated in orbit over Mars, cloaked by a dark energy field and equipped with soundless weapons, the kind that didn't fire beams, but made enemy vessels tear themselves apart from inside. The Dominion had no counter for such madness, no training for war against a species that invented chaos and wore it like armor. Still, the enemy flagship, Skyrend Eternal, remained untouched, hovering behind debris fields and hiding its core systems deep inside. A layered shield. Voss knew they had to break it not just for victory, but for a message. Earth was not prey, and it would never kneel. She gave the order for the final push, and the last phase of the reverse siege protocol activated. Operation Breaklight. This was not a standard attack. It was a calculated sacrifice. A fleet of old fusion reactors, carried by retrofitted cargo ships, moved silently toward the enemy flagship, each with its containment field set to overload. As they approached, Dominion sensors tried to track them, but Earth's tech had evolved. Each ship projected false data, mirrored signals, and AI-generated noise to confuse enemy targeting. By the time they realized the threat, it was too late. The fusion cores exploded in perfect sequence, not to destroy, but to open a breach in space itself. A localized gravity well that cracked the flagship's shielding like glass. Into that breach flew the Argo, its hull glowing red from stress, its captain silent as the ship vanished into the energy storm around Skyrend Eternal. Seconds later, the Dominion flagship erupted, not in a single explosion, but in waves of collapse, systems tearing apart, power surging backward, hull folding inward like paper in flame. The shockwave sent smaller alien vessels tumbling into escape jumps, and just like that, the heart of the invasion fleet was gone. Silence fell across Earth's comms for a breathless moment, and then cheers rose from bunkers, ships, and cities. People cried, laughed, shouted, and held each other, knowing the impossible had happened. Earth had not just survived, it had struck back. But amidst the victory, Voss didn't smile. Her eyes were locked on a quiet signal coming from deep space, a transmission picked up by Gravemind in the final seconds of the attack. It wasn't Dominion. It was older, deeper, a signal that hadn't been heard in thousands of years, hidden in the static of a collapsing flagship, coordinates and a single phrase: assessment failed, activate council response. Voss turned. to her crew, and though the battle was won, she said the one thing no one wanted to hear. It's not over. Someone else is coming. And in that moment, beneath a sky filled with drifting wreckage and flickering lights, humanity realized the truth. They had proved their strength, but now the galaxy would come to test their right to exist. The battlefield was quiet now, but not peaceful. Wreckage floated in low orbit like metal ghosts, and smoke from broken ships still drifted across Earth's upper skies. After the Great Retaliation, after the fall of the Dominion flagship Skyrend Eternal, Earth stood alive but tense, watching and waiting, knowing something worse might come. Only 17 enemy ships had escaped the fury of the reverse siege. Protocol, 17 out of the 9,900 that had first come to conquer. And now those 17 hovered at the edge of the solar system, silent and still. Not attacking, not retreating, just watching. Commander Alina Voss stood on the bridge of Aegis Prime, her eyes locked on the long-range scans, wondering what they were planning, if they were even ships at all anymore. No one knew what was inside them, if they were crewed or controlled by something else, something left behind when the rest of the fleet died. Gravemind had tried to contact them, sending 100 different messages in every known language and frequency, but no reply came, only that same strange signal captured. Before assessment failed, activate council response. And now the last 17 hung like judgment above Earth's fate. Some believed they were scouts waiting for new orders. Others said they were executioners waiting for the right moment. What was certain was that they did not act like damaged vessels. They moved in perfect formation, silent, waiting, never turning away, never turning toward, just staying on the edge of the dark. Voss called a meeting of Earth's highest command, linking in from underground cities, orbital platforms and mobile bunkers hidden beneath the oceans, and together they tried to decide, should Earth attack first or wait? Some wanted to strike. Now destroy the 17 before they could send more data or bring reinforcements, but others warned of a trap, a trigger, or worse, a final test. So Voss made the hardest choice, send a team not to fight, but to board. It was madness, but it was also the only way to understand what came next. The mission was codenamed Iron Thread, and the team was made of 5. The best pilot, the quietest hacker, the calmest strategist, the strongest engineer, and the last was not even fully human, but a hybrid AI made from the early cores of Gravemind and Valkyrie, designed to think beyond logic and emotion, just enough to survive where others might fall. They left in a stealth ship, barely more than a needle wrapped in shielding, slipping past ancient radiation fields and old defense. Grids no human ever thought they'd face. The 17 ships didn't react, didn't move, didn't fire, as the human vessel crept closer and finally docked with one of them. A black, spike-shaped ship with no markings, no lights, no heat. The boarding team entered through a tunnel like glass, wrapped in darkness, and inside they found something terrible and beautiful. Rooms shaped like memory, shifting with each step, walls that played whispers from Earth's history, as if the ship was reading them, understanding them, testing them. They passed through corridors where time felt wrong, slower, faster, sometimes looping, and at the center they found a chamber filled with floating orbs, each one showing a different planet, a different species, all marked failed. Earth was there too, glowing faintly, not marked failed, but something else. Review pending. Before they could react, a figure appeared, not alien, not human, but a projection shaped from the thoughts of the team, different for each member. And it spoke with a voice that wasn't sound, but feeling. You survived the Dominion. You broke the test. You revealed the flaw. No one moved. No one breathed. And the AI hybrid stepped forward, asking, "What test?" The figure replied, "We send war to judge growth. Dominion is the blade. You dulled the blade. You made chaos. You made choice." The team began recording everything, sending data back to Earth, and the figure continued. 17 ships remain, not warships. Judges, we do not decide yet. You are a question. The galaxy must answer. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the figure vanished, and the walls of the ship shifted, becoming smooth and empty. The team returned to their vessel, pulled back, and the 17 ships remained still, unchanged, unmoving. But now they knew the truth. These weren't enemies. They were watchers, holding judgment not just for Earth, but for the entire idea of what humans were becoming. Voss received the report and didn't speak for a long time. She understood what it meant, that the war might be over, but the challenge had just begun. Earth was no longer a battleground, but a stage, and the galaxy was watching to see what humans would do next, whether they would rebuild with mercy or with fire, whether they would unite or tear themselves apart, whether they would prove themselves ready or destroy everything they had just saved. The 17 ships waited in silence, and Earth, for the first time in memory, faced peace not with relief, but with questions. And in that silence, in that uneasy calm, humanity stood on the edge of something greater than war. The test of who they truly were and who they would choose to become. Above a silent Earth, the 17 ships still watched, unmoving and unblinking, like statues of judgment carved from darkness. Yet below, something had changed, something deep and powerful. Earth, scarred and bruised, was healing faster than anyone expected, not just its cities or machines, but its spirit. After centuries of division, of borders and distrust, the fires of war had done the unthinkable. United humanity. Commander Alina Voss stood before the new Global Council, now made up not of politicians, but of scientists, soldiers, builders, and thinkers who had proven themselves when everything was falling apart. The Council's chambers floated in orbit aboard the reconstructed Aegis Prime, now a symbol not of defense, but of future purpose. Behind her, screens showed every continent, every ocean platform, every orbital station, working together in real time, cleaning, repairing, creating. It was not peace that had made humanity ascend, but the will to survive together, and now that same will reached toward the stars. The Council had voted, and the project was clear. Humanity would not wait. For the galaxy's judgment, they would face it head-on. In the shadows of the 17 silent judges, humans began building something never seen before. Not a ship, not a weapon, but a message in motion. A vessel called Unity Spark, meant not for war, but for revelation. It would carry no guns, no bombs, only knowledge, hope, and proof of change. Its heart was powered by the same unstable core once used to tear through Dominion lines, now refined into something stable, something beautiful, a core that pulsed with human ingenuity. Volunteers from every nation joined the mission, not to fight, but to speak, to listen, and to carry Earth's truth to the stars. Among them were survivors, war heroes, scientists who had once hidden underground, even children who had grown up in bunkers now trained to be ambassadors. And behind them, the Earth built itself into something new. Solar towers rose from deserts, orbital elevators reached upward from old ruins, and deep-sea vaults of knowledge were unlocked and shared. Voss watched it all unfold, and she knew something powerful had happened. Humanity had grown, not because they had to, but because they chose to. And finally, the 17 ships moved. Not to attack, not to flee, but to open, revealing their true forms, which were not ships at all, but ancient living machines built by a council so old its name had been lost to time. One descended toward Earth, slow and careful, and from it came a single envoy, tall and faceless, shaped like starlight wrapped in memory. It stood before Voss and the council, and without words, it shared a vision, a moment in the distant future where humanity stood not alone, but beside hundreds of other species, not as followers, but as equals. It showed Earth as a center of learning, of diplomacy, of courage. And then the vision faded, and the envoy waited, giving no order, making no threat, only asking with its silence, "Are you ready?" Voss stepped forward, heart pounding, and answered not with words, but by stepping aside and revealing the crew of Unity Spark, standing tall and unafraid. The envoy nodded once and turned away, vanishing in light, and the 17 ships rose together, surrounding Unity Spark like guardians, and together they left Earth's orbit, not in retreat, but in invitation. As they vanished into the stars, the people of Earth watched and realized the truth. They were no longer just survivors, no longer a species crawling through dust. They were something more. They had taken the worst the galaxy could send and risen stronger. They had faced the test and rewritten it. They were no longer being judged. They were joining the judges. In every corner of the planet, people looked up and saw not fear, but future. And in the quiet that followed, in the new light of dawn, one phrase echoed through every broadcast, every message, every heart: humanity ascendant. And from that day on, the stars were no longer silent. They were waiting.